brothers, sisters, and fellow travelers. I'm the Stormy Poet, and this is Poethnic Justice. In an article by ABC, it reads, in Marion County, Florida, after years of threats, a feud ends with a black mom dead and her white neighbor arrested. A Florida woman accused of fatally shooting her neighbor last week in the violent culmination of what the sheriff described as a 2.5-year feud was arrested Tuesday, the Marion County Sheriff's Office said. Susan Louise Lawrence, a 58-year-old white woman, was arrested on charges of manslaughter with a firearm, culpable negligence, battery, and 2 counts of assault in the death of Ajike Owens, a black mother of 4. Now, gee, I'm asking myself, what in the world is up with all these manslaughter charges every single time a white person intentionally kills a black person, even under the so-called stand your ground law? The sheriff will attempt to invoke this defense of Lawrence later on in the piece, but we'll get to that. The last time I checked, murder constitutes someone who intentionally is trying to kill someone. Murder is the unlawful killing of a human being with malice aforethought. It is a crime that has elements of criminal act, criminal intent, causation, and harm. Family, if you shoot someone, it's for one reason and one reason only. You're trying to end them. Whether it be in self-defense or because you've had a 2.5-year feud with someone and you can't stand them to the point that you want to end their life. When you shoot someone, it's for that reason and that reason only. Either that or you understand very well them dying is a possibility. Where black people are concerned, it takes a situation like what happened in South Carolina where a 14-year-old Cyrus Carmack Belton literally had to be fleeing the gunman and had to be shot in the back for his killer to be charged with murder. And even then, the public had to put pressure on law enforcement to arrest Rick Chow. They claimed they found a gun close by where Cyrus lay dead, like that matters because the cops just never plant stuff, right? And the monster that was helping his killer dad chase down the victim wasn't charged with being an accomplice nor failure to render aid. It takes a crime being so blatantly heinous and demonic to get a murder charge on behalf of a black person, and even then the DAs have to be brought in kicking and screaming by the public and forced to. Even in the case of Ajike Owens, Sheriff Billy Woods, begrudgingly I bet, had to eventually admit that this was not a stand your ground case, but quote, simply a killing. He tried to white-splain to the press by saying, and many of you were struggling to understand why there was not an immediate arrest. Here in the state of Florida area, the law is clear. Now, I may not like them, I may not agree with them, but however, those laws I will follow, end quote. Family, I'm not exactly fluent in male-splain, but let me try to interpret that for you. What he was saying basically was that he was beginning to feel the heat of the righteous outrage of the public because hours before the arrest on Tuesday, June 7th, 2023, some 3 dozen protesters, most of them black, were already gathered outside the Marion County Judicial Center, letting them know that if this killer was not arrested and charged, that things could go wrong very quickly. They were letting them know we can have a repeat of 2020 if you really want to take it there. Now, the article doesn't specify exactly how long they were protesting before their arrest, but I have a sneaking suspicion it played a role in speeding up the process of them figuring out whether it was a stand your ground issue or not. Apparently, it was taking long enough that the Black Street had to step up and let old Billy Woods know just what was at stake if it took too much longer to make the arrest. Even though the sheriff has already stated he didn't see enough evidence to support a stand your ground situation, Lawrence is still being charged with manslaughter and not murder. By the way, in this article by ABC, I found no mention of who the prosecutors were, nor was there an explanation as to how those charges were reached. Now, if itty-bitty, small-time, independent journalists like me knows well enough to ask a question like that, do you think the big league journalists over at ABC's don't have enough sense to? They're not asking because they're doing what the white media does and running interference for law enforcement and the courts, and they're helping them to reinforce the subconscious notion to the public that whenever a black person is harmed or murdered, they somehow deserved it. They hide the names and the faces of these prosecutors who come up with these ridiculous charges and don't report it to you what the charges are even based on. And CNN and MSNBC are doing the same thing. By the way, just in case you're curious, the chief prosecutor on the case is State Attorney William Gladson. NPR, even though they didn't question the basis of the charges, at least had the guts to print the guy's name. I mean, something beneficial, I guess, does come out of publicly funded radio. Now, the piece goes on to quote, during a news conference at New St. John Missionary Baptist Church on Wednesday afternoon, the victim's family, friends, and community leaders joined civil rights attorney Ben Crump in thanking the sheriff for making their arrest while calling for justice for Owens. They thanked the sheriff for merely doing his job and upholding the law. Really? That is not a difficult case, Crump said. He called on the state attorney's office to, quote, zealously prosecute the shooter. The family, when I hear the words church and crump, especially in the same sentence, I'm sure you experienced the same onset of nausea like I did when I first read it. Those who study systematic white supremacy and how it utilizes its willful non-white collaborators know it's only a matter of time before we start hearing the I forgives and the we should just heal and move on talk and the it's not about race, it's about gun violence talk. Any and everything except punishment, aka justice. I like what Brother Ogun said, father of Micah Khalid Logan, who was murdered by the medical staff at Children's Hospital of Houston. He said, I don't give a damn about a settlement. No amount of millions could ever bring my family member back. All I care about is punishment. I'm a believer myself and I'm all about forgiveness, but my forgiveness of others is between the maker and myself, and all the money in the world isn't going to bring back my family members, so no amount of money is worth someone escaping punishment or getting a slap on the wrist for harming them. I don't need to announce to the entire world I've forgiven someone. You can throw all the settlement cash you want at me. I don't want it if it doesn't come coupled with harsh, very harsh punishment. In all too many cases where a black person is murdered by a suspected white supremacist, particularly the family of the victim is quick to go on a I forgive tour and or they end up linking up with Marble Mouth Crump and his likes for a settlement check over the dead body of their relative. And engaging in this kind of cowardly behavior isn't harmless because the white media is all too eager to show a black person saying they forgive their family members' killers. Because this signals to the society at large there is no amount of harm too egregious, nor violence too extreme that black people won't allow you to commit against them. Contrary to common belief, the media isn't doing it to, quote, show how compassionate and human we are as a people. Furthermore, seeing displays like this influences judges and juries to go for lighter sentences. The Amber Geiger case was a clear example of that when one of the jury members said in an interview with WFAA after the trial, they held off on giving her a stiff sentence for murdering both of John because they saw how forgiving and compassionate the family was to Geiger in court. The next anti-black racist who thinks of harming and killing a black person, and when they see that there's no stiff punishment for doing so, they become emboldened. Harsh punishments are the only mechanisms that prevent these kinds of tragedies from occurring over and over. The same applies to linking up with the likes of Crump to do these backroom deals with municipalities for settlement checks in exchange for lighter sentences. And the taxpayers foot that bill anyways. Paying out a settlement for killing an unarmed black person doesn't come out of anyone's check except the citizens. Owens was murdered, point blank, period. And that is a fact no matter how much witchcraft and smoke and mirrors the white media tries to pull off to get us to think otherwise. How does the Stormy Poet know? Well, it's because I have eyes and ears, that's why. And I question whether or not there was some, quote, 2-year feud. What exactly were they feuding about? Sounds more to me like this Lawrence dirtbag had been harassing the black family for the past 2 years, and like the mom did what any mother would do if they or their kids were being harassed. They would stick up for themselves and their children. It says in the article that according to the sheriff's account that Lawrence threw a pair of skates at Owens' kids as they played in the yard, striking one of the children. Sounds to me like Owens went to confront her about it like any parent would naturally, and like Lawrence came to the door with a gun ready to let off. If they've been going at it for 2 years, it sounds to me like Lawrence could have been planning this all along and could have attacked her children to provoke her to come and confront her. That's called premeditated murder, folks, not manslaughter. She didn't kill her by accident. When you attack someone's children, you know the parent will likely come to defend them. You bringing a gun when they come to do so perfectly illustrates your intentions. Lawrence Smith, one of the neighbors across the street from where the shooting took place, even said she was angry all the time that the children were playing out there. She would say nasty things to them, just nasty. Now, exactly what are the kind of nasty things a 50-year-old white woman who's always angry about the kids playing out there for no apparent reason would say to little black children minding their own business? It was also stated, quote, the sheriff's office hasn't confirmed there were slurs uttered or said that whether race was a factor in the shooting. Yeah, I'm sure this occurrence has everything to do with just gun violence and absolutely nothing to do with anti-black bigotry. Family, as most of you probably know, Suzanne Louise Lawrence isn't special. From George Zimmerman to Jeffrey Ziegler to Daniel Penny, Andrew Lester, Amber Geiger, and Rick Chow. It was law enforcement, aka the courts, that dragged their ass to arrest them and who improperly charged them. the families who went on the forgiveness tours, aka the cowards, which helped to influence lighter sentences, and the media who bends over backwards to meticulously omit key facts, who just flat out lies to the public. They all work in concert with one another towards the maintenance of systematic white supremacy, whether or not the individuals in each area of activity who are carrying it out are aware of it. I say this all for one reason. We as a people must realize the dire and desperate situation we're in and make a realistic assessment of the magnitude of the enemy we're up against. I know many of you are new to spaces like this and will likely hear what's been said and be like, man, it's not that serious and you're just reading too much into it, or man, everything is already messed up. What's the point of even trying to change things? Let me say this in no uncertain terms, that is straight up coward talk. Those are excuses from people who are either too afraid or too lazy to do anything. To those kind of people, I don't want you around here, and neither do the people who've put in countless man hours to create social change on behalf of black people. Ain't no disrespect to the family of Ajike Owens, but if they begin spouting that we forgive rhetoric for the cameras, it's that kind of cowardly rhetoric that influences the anti-black racist to murder the next black person. More and more punishment is becoming the norm for these white supremacists who murder black people in cold blood. The killers of Ahmaud Arbery are a prime example, but we can't let up off the gas when it comes to pushing that narrative. And the way we accomplish this is by waking up every day and living our lives in a codified manner. For some black people, their freedom to goof off, watch TV, smoke weed, and spend time purchasing consumer goods and engaging in gossip is more important than their survival and the survival of the next generation. What does being on code look like? It looks like being trained in weaponry and combat. Professor Black Truth always gives his power tools ad in his Moment of Truth videos, expressing the obligation for every black person to know how to protect themselves via the hammer, the steel, and the leaf blower. We all should know how to protect ourselves and our children in every possible way. It's an obligation to each and every one of us. Being on code means not ever letting your children out of your sight while they play or while they roam about. While it'd be nice if we lived in a society, relatively speaking, where all you had to worry about were the general dangers everyone has to deal with, black children, as we've seen recently in the past few months, are specifically targeted, and the system is lined up to back them on the play to those who choose to do so. Being on code means being unapologetic and ruthless when calling for harsh punishment on behalf of the family members when they are ripped from your life, all because someone had an issue with them because of the skin they were born with. White supremacy is demonic, and the only way that you help deter the society from practicing this form of Satanism is that you deter their behavior with the most severe of consequences. We've seen scores of black men being unconstitutionally lynched in the streets by police for decades, but as we've seen, especially in the past few months, black women and children are the favorite targets of the white supremacists because they're ultimately cowards and they prefer targets that can't fight back. No other group is coming to save us, and frankly, many other ethnic groups are coming in to act as reinforcements in the operation of our oppression. One thing I can respect about the white supremacists being on code is that they are on code to the point where it doesn't have to be spelled out. It's just understood by the white majority and the society at large. That's why a random 58-year-old white woman in Florida did what she did to Ajike Owens. She knew the media, a judicial system, and a non-white apologist class would come and defend whatever crime she committed against that black mother of four. When it comes to combating the judicial system, the traitor class, and the propaganda entities of the white power structure, our code of justice and fairness needs to match their code's same energy. One love and one justice. The Stormy Poet.